Most people I know are doing everything they can to feel better by eating better, training better, sleeping better, and going to their primary care. And they still feel off or brain fog, tired, like something needs to change still. What if I told you that the problem isn't what they're doing, it's what they don't know? Today, I'm sitting down with the CEO and founder of The Fountain, a precision wellness center that's doing something most medical practices aren't. Welcome to the show. Most people aren't unhealthy because they're not trying. They're unhealthy because they've never been given the right information about their own body. Would you say that's true?
Yeah, and there's a ton of information to be had about the human body, right? And that's ultimately where at least the message we hear coming through from our clients. I had a gentleman in yesterday. This example is top of mind. Done a bunch of things. Seen primarily utilizes his primary care physician. Travels a bunch for work. Overseas constantly, and during our intake conversation, he just kept coming back to like, I need that missing puzzle piece. Right. And it's a great analogy because the human body, I mean, there are so many pieces that fit together. And whether you're on one side of the board or the other, they're all interconnected. And that seems to be the issue that a lot of people are running into right now is that there's so much information available. Right. And it's so easy to get sucked down one rabbit hole and think you're doing the right thing for yourself, or get sucked down another rabbit hole and think that this is the right thing. And maybe you get some temporary results, but a lot of time the conversation is not being had about how does this one intervention or this one change affect everything else. And it's really difficult with the current healthcare system for anybody to be capable of navigating that. Physician, provider, patient, right? And you get to this weird place all the time where it's like, at a certain point, you've kind of been through the traditional system a few times, and it seems like you're almost going in circles. And you get to this place where you're like, I don't understand what I'm missing at this point, and that's really difficult for patients. A lot of people come in and they're very exhausted by not having the answers that they've spent tens, if not hundreds, of hours searching for.
When someone comes into the fountain, what's the one thing that you always find people saying that they've been told looks normal by other doctors or people that they've seen?
It's their blood work, right? And it's what you kind of just alluded to, and it's that their blood work looks fine, but they still don't feel well, right? They feel off. And blood work's fantastic. Like blood work is, again, what we've been utilizing as the gold standard of diagnostics for decades, and it's great for an individual snapshot. Like, here's the state of your health right now. It's great as a diagnostic tool, but in the traditional healthcare system, a lot of times you get providers chasing numbers, and all they're concerned about is, are you within those ranges, right? You can be high end of the range, low end of the range, but it certainly doesn't show early risk, right? It doesn't show long-term trajectory. And again, the biggest problem is if there is something that's out of range, blood work's not going to tell you how intervening in that domain that's out of range is impacting everything else. I mean, you look at anybody in the traditional healthcare system that is in their 50s, 60s, 70s, very unlikely they're just taking one, they're taking multiple medications. And a lot of factors contribute to that, right, from what we've seen in our clinic. But it seems to be more that, hey, we started with this issue, we intervened here because that's the priority, right? It's reactive medicine. And then another issue pops up. Right? Think about you're flying an airplane, a light, warning light comes on. It's like, well, let's flip the switch to turn that light off and hopefully correct the problem. But then another light pops up. And so you're kind of in this game of like just keeping the lights off, when in reality, the underlying issue of the plane may still exist, right? The engine may still be getting ready to fail and crash and burn, but hey, at least all the lights are off, right? And that's kind of scary.
Yeah, you had mentioned normal ranges for blood work
Mhm.
being a little misleading. What does normal actually mean in the context of blood work? And how can it be misleading?
So normal varies lab to lab, practice to practice, provider to provider. I even see it, very easy thing for people to understand, especially men in this space, is testosterone. Depending upon the lab that you go to, Quest, LabCorp, we use a local lab called Access, their normal ranges, which obviously were established by some medical professional somewhere, vary. And so you can go into primary care physician, urologist, and your testosterone's at the lower end of the range. And they're like, well, it's okay. You're at the lower end of the range. You're still within range. Yeah, you're not feeling well. You don't sleep well. Brain fog all the time. No energy. You're gaining weight. Your testosterone, say the low end of the range is 250, is a 260. Well, you're still in the range, so we're not going to do it. It's like maybe that's not the best approach. And a lot of progressive, preventive, longevity-focused clinics are getting to where we're focusing more on combination, right? It's not just the blood work. It's also how's the patient doing, right? If we're just chasing numbers all day and the patient still feels terrible, that's not a win in our book, at least.
Yeah. So normal just means you're not sick yet. It doesn't mean you're well.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. I mean, it means that you are average for the population. And again, the whole longevity space focuses on optimization. Like, of course, mitigating health risk is important, right? Focusing on longevity and health span and maintaining how well we're feeling for a long time. But we really get to the word optimization. Average okay is not, I think, what most people are going for. We're in a really fun time in our society where, especially men, right? Let me take that back. I don't want to make it exclusive to men, but I think we're seeing a bigger trend in men where they're trying to, live their best life, if you will, getting out of the grind of being the absent father and working themselves to death. And so most men that come into our facility are not looking to just, hey, I just want to feel okay. I want to feel my best. And that's always been a big, ethos for me, is like, I want to live an excellent life. I don't want to live just an okay ho-hum, like nothing wrong with that. But for me personally, and a lot of the guys that come and seek us out, it's like they want to maximize, whether that's their presence at home with their kids, their productivity in the workplace and their business, and just extract from life everything that it has to offer.
Yeah. I think about what, for me as an average person, the most common thing that I've used as a benchmark or standard for my health, and that's the annual physical, where I go into my primary care. And because it's been the standard, I feel like I hear a lot of questions not being asked or things being missed. And don't get me wrong, I'm sure there are so many incredible doctors doing it the right way, but
Yeah.
what is typically being missed during an annual physical that people need to be asking?
This is no fault of the doctor. I'll put that out there. The traditional healthcare system forces them into a business model that requires volume, right? Insurance reimbursements have always been trending downwards, right? In any healthcare industry, whether that's substance abuse, primary care, orthopedics, like oncology, whatever it is, insurance is a for-profit business. They're always trending reimbursements down. That being said, doctors' offices that accept insurance have to figure out how to be more efficient. And the way to be more efficient is to hire a bunch of nurse practitioners that spend 10 to 15 minutes with every patient, and they see 80 to 100 patients per day. Again, no fault of the doctors. They have to make a living and provide care for as many people as possible, but it's easy to see how things can get missed, or it almost feels like, hey, I'm just going to check this box. I'll speak for me. Every time I would go to my primary care physician in the traditional healthcare system, the 5 years leading up to when we opened our clinic, and like I've stopped going since, and utilize our facility to manage my health. It just felt like I was like checking the box. It's just like, okay, I need to do this every year to make sure, again, there's nothing catastrophic, but am I really being proactive about my health here? Am I actually taking action to prevent things long term? And I walked away every visit, go every 6 months, right? So 10 times in that 5 years leading up to, all right, I'm kind of done with this approach. Every time just kind of more discouraged, more apathetic, more accepting my fate is like, this is what my healthcare is going to be. And however I'm feeling is how I'm going to kind of feel. And this is, in my early to mid 30s. So it was very discouraging in that sense. But again, the doctors, I think, are trying to do well. And you see the doctors that are maybe earlier in their career, a lot more doctors trending into the concierge model, because I think from the outside in, people maybe think like, oh, it's a money grab opportunity because they charge a lot. It's like, no, most concierge physicians that I speak to, it's like, they just felt terrible, spending 10 minutes per patient. not being able to really understand what's going on with them. And we've kind of been the same way in our business. And I've talked about it on this podcast before, where we didn't want to be a volume game. We didn't want to be another commodity, another, med spa. There's a lot of great med spas out there, not the dog on med spas, but I see the industry trending towards commoditization, race to the bottom in pricing. And so if you're going to be a low price, you got to be high volume. That doesn't do anything for me. And I think the doctors that are going into concierge medicine, that doesn't do them either. They want to be able to have a patient sit across from them, spend 30, 45 minutes, an hour with them as the physician, not their nurse practitioner, and really understand what's going on with that person. And that, for me, and I think for the concierge doctors, is really.
Yeah. So help someone who doesn't understand what the fountain is define where you land. Can someone replace their primary care with the fountain? I see med spa as something that's branded, but you offer things that some medical practices don't. What can I utilize the fountain for if I'm looking for a better health solution in my life?
That's a great question. I'm still working on the verbiage because I think we've kind of defined our own category in terms of what we're doing. And the depth with which we're going with patients. So I'm still working on the vernacular to best describe it. Longevity center is kind of the generic term that I would use right now. We started off very much as a med spa, hormone therapy, peptides, medical weight loss, aesthetics, IVs. And again, very quickly just realized hey, this is great. Not for us though, because especially here in South Florida, the market is just super saturated and commodity, becoming commoditized, becoming price sensitive, and therefore requiring volume. So it was also tough, even though we did a great job when people come into our center of retaining them because we provide a superior level of care. We got in this place where we're spinning our tires revenue wise because we're spending so much time with people on this commoditized low price offering that we couldn't grow. And also, even though we were retaining people when they got to our door, it's tough from a marketing perspective to differentiate ourselves when all we're doing is saying what everybody else says. And that's, hey, we do great, with great customer service, great patient experience. Like everybody claims that. Does everybody deliver? No, we did. But we realized that we've got to figure out a way to, one, better serve our clients, be able to go deeper with them, and two, differentiate ourselves in the market. So about 6 months after we opened, we started kind of making this shift where we're now focusing more on diagnostics. Because again, we're already doing blood work from day one, but like we said, it's a snapshot, right? And there's the sophisticated patient recognizes that this is good and I need more information. That's the next logical kind of progression in the longevity patient journey is blood work. All right, now I need more diagnostics. So we started getting into a lot of the genetic stuff, expanded our traditional blood work panels into some really advanced blood work, nutritional sensitivity, food allergy, et cetera. And at the same time, one of my business partners in the fountain owns Encore Imaging. And so he has traditionally been an insurance-based imaging facility. You hurt your knee, go to the doctor, they write you a prescription, you go in and get a knee MRI. Or you're in a car accident, right? Go see a doctor. Now we're using car insurance instead of health insurance, but same thing. Hurt your neck, go get an MRI. At this time, he's like, hey, I'm really hearing a lot about this preventive full body scan, cash pay. Sounds like an awesome product and a great way to serve people, one, but two, we can diversify our offering and not just be, again, strictly reliant on the health insurance rates that are constantly going down in both auto and health insurance. So that's the same time we're starting to integrate all of these genetic tests. I think that would be a great addition to what we're doing. Now we can look at the body structurally from a genetic standpoint and from the blood work. And so 6 months after we opened, we decided to go under, maybe like 9 months after we opened, we tore up half of our space, took over the bay next door. We're under construction for another 6 months, and that was rough. But beginning of 2015, we opened, and it was great. We had all these diagnostic options available. The problem we started running into, though, is the data overload and the information overload. And patients coming in, now they want all the diagnostics, but even under our roof, they would see, if you were to do all the diagnostics we have currently, we're adding more as we speak, under our roof to review all of those diagnostics, you would see for physicians and providers. And because they're each looking at the body through a different lens, right? They have their own backgrounds, their own training, their own personal clinical experience, but also they're looking at your body, either structural, genetic, blood work, et cetera. They're going to have different priorities. And ultimately, put the patient in a place where we're recommending 30, 40 things from a lifestyle, dietary, therapeutic supplement standpoint of here's what we have to do to optimize, with no clear path as to what's really priority. Like, of course, there are certain things that are going to stand out, but from a health risk standpoint, from a longevity standpoint, it's like, well, okay, these all sound great. I'm not going to start 40 things at once. Like, where do I start? And do I really need all of it? And so this is kind of the problem that we're facing now in healthcare across the board, and the problem we've really tried to solve with QLP. So a patient coming in now with the introduction of QLP is able to do all the diagnostics, get a full picture, or at least the fullest picture available of their health. I think anybody that says we have a full grasp on the human body is a little naive. Like, there's still tons out there we can learn, but in terms of the diagnostics available and what's actually useful, under our roof, people can get all of that. But then on the back end, also, we can now synthesize that data and identify what's signal versus what's noise, right? And then also create a prioritized game plan for that individual based on how aggressively or how conservatively they want to approach it, right? Somebody a little younger, maybe early mid 30s, right, coming in, still working full time, very busy. Like, they're not going to go after it the same veracity as somebody who's 50s, 60s, maybe just sold their business and now have, neglected their health for 20 years and now they have all the resources and time in the world. They're probably going to be a little bit more aggressive about their approach. So this system allows us to now do that. So in terms of what patients can do coming in to see us, sorry for the long roundabout answer, but we can meet people where they're at in their longevity journey, right? And it's not one size fits all. It's important that the care is individualized, and we spend a lot of time with them on the front end getting to know and understand the patient. We do a health clarity session to start. That is before we even talk anything about medical. It's really about, why are you here? It's really about, why are they here? Understanding the patient, what their motivations are, and making sure that we're serving those desires. And then from there, right, we are able to identify. We go through that. We understand why they're there. We explain to them kind of what I just explained to you. Here's the full spectrum, and here's the longevity patient hero journey. Here's the exact things you're going to face from start until you're done. Not with us, just in longevity in general. And we want to meet you where you're at. So based on what your goals are, based on all the things we've told you about the fountain and what we can or cannot do, and how shallow or how surface level or deep you want to go with us, we want to meet you where you're at. What of this sounds like the right fit for you? And ultimately, again, we have a conversation about what we believe would be the best fit for them, but we want to meet them where they're at. And not that they're not dictating their care, they're dictating how they engage us. But from there, it's very controlled, and there's very specific pathways that they can go with us. And that's another issue that we see in our industry, specifically kind of the longevity hormone peptide clinic space, is like, patients are coming in and demanding what they want in clinic, because they want to sell the extra item, right? It's like, well, that's not healthcare. That's not good for anybody. So it's easy and tempting to get sucked into that, because somebody's sitting there telling you they want to spend more money in your business. But we had to draw a hard line in the sand and just be like, look, like, this is ethically like not appropriate. And ultimately, we know long-term, again, aligning what's best for the business, what's best for the company will serve us well long-term, and everybody will win.
So is all of this a failure of our healthcare system, or is something else going on with how maybe myself or someone older is approaching their health?
Knee-jerk reaction is healthcare system, because ultimately the time and resources have been put in to develop that system. And I think, as a society, we want to trust the system, right? And so it's kind of been the only option that existed for a long time. This is the only way to manage your healthcare. It was much more restricted. Everything you did, you had to have an order from a doctor. And I understand that methodology, but over time, it's become, the lines have been kind of blurred between profit and patient. And we've gotten to a weird place now where the traditional system isn't really serving people that well. I mean, look at the state of healthcare in our country. It's not good. And we're, for having all the financial resources that we do as a country, we're still ranked very poorly in comparison in terms of our health. And so I'd say it's more on the system than it is the patient. But as patients start to wake up to this being true, as they start to wake up to the traditional healthcare system failing them, they can't try to put the more preventive concierge longevity approach in the same box and expect that, hey, I'm going to go, my insurance is going to cover this. I'm only going to pay a copay. Like, I get and understand it'd be nice if that was the case, but the system's not there yet. It's going to lag behind. Hopefully it catches up eventually. But I think that people need to start making that transition of like, okay, this is failing me, and it's failing me because of the way the system is set up, and the system is set up to be affordable, but kind of get what you pay for, right? It's a more cost-effective system, but the quality of care is poor. So if you want a higher quality of care, you need to go into a system that probably costs a little bit more. It's like anything, looking at purchasing a vehicle, right? You can't go into a Mercedes dealership and expect to pay for a Toyota Corolla, right? Both fine cars, but you're not going to get the same quality and the same level of value out of the two. So I think the responsibility of the patients is now, as we are kind of opening our eyes to the issues of the traditional healthcare system, recognize like, okay, I have to make the conscious decision to invest in my health. And speak for me, it's an easy decision for me to make. I think a lot of people are struggling with that decision right now.
Yeah. What about high performers like yourself? You're a CEO, you're not necessarily a doctor. Where do those type of people tend to go wrong with their health?
Those type of people are used to making very informed, high stakes decisions. And I think that at least the conversations I've had with high performers, I've got a few that come to mind right off the bat. They have a lot of skepticism around healthcare because they recognize that the structures exist in other places. Let's talk about guys in private equity and finance, for example. Like that decision governance and taking all these variables into account and making really informed, governed decisions around their investments, right? Or how they're managing a portfolio hasn't really existed for healthcare until now. So they look at it with skepticism of like, am I getting the whole picture here? Is this really what I need? They probably also sense a little bit of they're being sold to in a lot of clinics they go to. That's a really common theme that we get. Patients have been to other clinics and they come in ours and like, yeah, the second I walk through the door, I'm being sold 100 things. And like, I've been there for 10 minutes. Like, how do you know I need all this after 10 minutes? And it's, they usually feel a sense of refreshment when they come into our building and we're not trying to sell them something. We're trying to understand them so that we can help them. And that ties back into where I think we're succeeding is with the high performers, high achievers that recognize how we do things differently, right? Somebody who, again, is maybe newer to the longevity space as a patient may not recognize that difference. But once you've been in it long enough, you start to feel that kind of that push for things that maybe aren't exactly appropriate or necessary. And then when you come to us, you're like, okay, this feels differently. So talking about high achievers, high performers, I'd say they're not wrong, right? They're not managing their healthcare poorly. I think they're just not taking enough action because they're skeptical. And I understand that. That's a very reasonable response to the way the current market is. So we're hoping to serve that population a lot better by giving them more informed decisions and truly understanding what they need as an individual.
That's interesting because I would say that the same drive that makes someone successful as a high achiever would also make them the worst patient, funny enough. They think that they can optimize their way out of biology and genetics. Do you find that to be true or false?
It's true. And we had Dr. Chase on here and she made it very clear. And I agree with, she's a physician, I'm not. So I agree with her, but obviously she would have the background to back it up. You can't completely your genetics yet. Maybe someday we will. We're not there yet. But again, health for me has always been probabilities, right? We can do things to mitigate risk. Even though I have a genetic predisposition for Alzheimer's and dementia, I started at 39 years old trying to do all the things I can to reduce the probability long term. Now, may still get it, right? Maybe it's 10, 15 years later than I would have. Maybe I don't get it all. Maybe I get it exactly the same time. For me, it's more about knowing that I'm doing what I can, taking control and taking ownership of my health and saying, all right, at this point, I feel confident that I have done everything in my power, that even if I develop Alzheimer's dementia in my early 60s, I did what I could. Wouldn't feel as good about it if I didn't do anything and just kind of guessed and threw my hands up in the air. I was like, oh, well, it's going to be what it's going to be. Some people like that approach. It's not for me. And I think for most high achievers, that's not the approach they take either.
I, like probably a lot of viewers listening to this, are kind of overwhelmed by all of the potholes that I'm trying to, swerve around and miss. There seems to be so much, especially I'm not a medical professional on any level. So there seems like an endless amount of ways that I could actually mess this up. So help me paint a picture. What does it look like when someone actually comes through the fountain for the first time and sees the full scope of data? And what do they find out that changes things?
So by the time somebody comes back in, they have done some or all of our diagnostics. We've already sat down and done a few things. Their first visit, we have done gotten to their why, right? Why are they there to see us? What's their motivating factor? We've told them about their options. They've kind of selected a path and how they want to engage us early on. But we also have done what's called a decision governance profile, which helps us understand how they make decisions around their healthcare. And then we've done a pretty robust medical intake as well. So we have a lot of context in terms of how this person makes decisions about their health, what their desired outcomes are. And that's, of course, context for when we're looking at labs, right? It's not just numbers on a sheet of paper. There's an individual behind this. And whether it's genetics, blood work, imaging, we want to know what's important to that person. With 800 pages of diagnostic data, we're not going to go through everything. It's kind of a lot, but we're going to touch on the things that are either glaring to us as a facility or are important to the patient that help give them peace of mind and reduce a lot of the anxiety around their health. So when they come back in after doing the diagnostics, the full body MRI is reviewed by an internal medicine MD with them on the phone. They get a clinical report like you would for any MRI of the joint, but it's for your entire body. And then they're also going to get a patient-facing report, which is really cool. So the patient-facing report is AI generated. It's put into layman's terms, and it also gives them questions based on their incidental or adverse findings. Here's questions you should ask the physician when you're on the phone, or if you're going to take this to another physician, maybe your primary care or your concierge doctor, here's the questions you should be asking based on what we see. And then on the phone, Dr. Devine is the physician that we have on our team. He spends 30 to 45 minutes, not just answering questions, but explaining, this is what this means. This is what this means. And if there's something that is adverse and needs follow-up, he tells them, like, you need to seek out this kind of physician, either go see your primary, go follow up with an oncologist, go follow up with this type of physician, and hopefully get them to that next step. In terms of the genetics, a regenerative medicine physician goes through it with them. So the genetics are looking at, again, what are our predispositions? What things are kind of working against us? We talk about, what's optimal, right? Here's where your genetics are great. Here's things you kind of don't have to worry about. Of course, doesn't mean neglect those areas of your life and self-sabotage, but, compared to the average person, you're good here genetically. What we're really concerned with is the suboptimal genetics, right? The things that are kind of working against you. For example, my genetic predisposition for Alzheimer's dementia, my chronic inflammation, right? I'm susceptible to chronic inflammation. I don't methylate well. So those things popping up, it's like, all right, these are things that can actually move the needle decades in advance. That's what we're focusing on. And we're also giving insight into, from a lifestyle, dietary, supplement, therapeutic intervention standpoint, here's all the things you can do. That also gives us additional context, when we're looking at blood work. Because again, blood work just being a snapshot doesn't always tell us the cause, right? But if we have a structural image of the body, we have genetics, we can start to put together a pretty nice picture of, like, here's how it all ties together. Now, we do that on our own, and the patients will kind of get a little bit of that if they're just doing just the diagnostics. But full disclosure, what we found, and I think most physicians would agree, is it's kind of still fragmented and incomplete because you have those multiple providers and physicians looking at the body through different lenses. We'll try to synthesize as best we can, but really QLP as a program is what's going to bring all that together and tell us with a lot more certainty that this is what we need to pay attention to. This is what we can kind of keep an eye on and maybe defer for now. And this data, even though maybe it looks like something is popping up, either we monitor it down the road or we just ignore it altogether because it's not really relevant or a high risk.
What's the benefit of having the information from the full body MRI in addition to genetic testing and blood work?
It's just looking at the body through a different angle, right? So structurally speaking. So really, when we're putting multiple diagnostics together, the intention is to clarify the signal. So again, going back to myself, I just keep using myself as an example here. Genetic predisposition for Alzheimer's dementia, coupled with chronic high cholesterol and inflammation markers and early white matter changes in the brain indicate that I am high risk for, if I do not do something specifically about high cholesterol and chronic inflammation, that I'm already genetically prone to Alzheimer's dementia and I've already got some early white matter changes, right? Doesn't necessarily mean I'm definitely going to develop it, but the chances of me developing Alzheimer's dementia, if I continue down this pathway without making some changes here, is going to be pretty significant. So when we're looking at multiple health domains, again, the intention is not, let's just get more data and like look at all these, now we have all this information. It's what is consistent across these, what conclusions can we more confidently draw from the diagnostics? That's where the value is. Now, of course, people come in and do the individual tests. We always try to talk to them about the benefit of doing multiple diagnostics, but some people, look, they want to just do a full body MRI for cancer screening. That's their concern. They're maybe not far enough down the longevity pathway to understand or value the cross-domain analysis. But again, through education, we try to get them there. And typically, if people are with us, long enough, they start off very simple, and that's fun. We like starting simple, but then we gradually add more and more to what they're.
So there are people like Brian Johnson out there, famous health guru who's spending more money than most people can fathom to optimize your health and get this, what is termed your biological age, different than your chronological age, which is what's on your birth certificate. So what exactly, explain what the difference between the chronological age on their birth certificate is and their biological age, and why it would be important because of what having a lower biological age actually tells you about how that person is living.
I was very skeptical of this test before we started doing it. Of course, I did it myself. I was 39 years old at the time. My biological age came back as 64, which was a huge, again, on top of the imaging, on top of the functional DNA, on top of the blood work. What a high biological age means doesn't mean average male lifespan 74 years, doesn't mean I'm going to drop dead in 10 years. What that means is I have the same susceptibility to age-related disease such as Alzheimer's dementia, cancer, stroke, aneurysm, etc., as an average 64-year-old. So chronological age is just 39 years, right? How long I had been on this earth. 64 so chronological age, right? 39 years, how long I had been on this earth, compared to biological age, which is 64 years at the time of taking this test, big disparity. Biological age is a current snapshot of your entire life. So from the time you were born until the time of the test, takes into consideration a few things. How do you age? What are genetic predispositions for aging, right? What have been your environmental exposures? What are you putting in your body, right? What stress are you exposed to? And so for me, exercise, eat well. I don't think we have any real toxins we're exposed to here. Everybody would be extremely high, right? Stress and genetics, right? I think are the two contributors to my biological age. So that can change over time through intervention, lifestyle changes, therapies, et cetera. And the goal, of course, is to bring that down until, my chronological age, they meet somewhere in the middle, hopefully closer to 40 than 65, and then even have it go backwards. And that's great when we're looking at kind of a state of the union, right, assessment of our biological age. The other really cool component of this test is pace of aging, which is a snapshot of right now, how are we doing? So let's say, for example, in my instance, first 35 years of my life, I was terrible, eating terrible, drinking, drugs, not exercising, not taking care of my body, high stress, like all the bad things. But then maybe from 35 to 39, I was doing really well. Well, my biological age is still really high at that time I took the test at 39. How do I know if what I'm doing now is actually working, right? That's where pace of aging comes in. So pace of aging, right? If you're at a 1, it means you're aging 1 biological year per calendar year, which would be the average, how average humans age. Anything below that is good. Anything above that is bad. So at the time of that test, I was at a 0.88, which means I'm 12% slower than the average human, which is great. Look at guys like Brian Johnson, who have the lowest in the world. And I actually met a guy that's challenging him for that a few weeks ago, which is pretty cool. But he's at 0.6. And that means he's aging 0.6 years biologically for every calendar year, which is pretty cool. Now, he's dumping millions of dollars per year into it. But we don't all have those resources. So we, as the not ultra wealthy individuals, need to be a little bit more selective about how we're deploying those resources and actually doing things that work. And again, that's where all the diagnostics come in on the front end. Like, yeah, we pay a little bit more on the front end for advanced diagnostics. On the back end, especially if we're, I think most people are planning on going down this longevity pathway for the rest of their life. It's not something, hey, I'm going to do this for 2 years and then I'm good. Can save you a lot of money on the back end because you're, again, understanding what things are actually going to work for you instead of just this approach of throw everything at the wall and hope you're doing the right things in there somewhere. So again, people that are maybe a little more conscious of the resources, it's important that you have that information.
So Blake, I have an ultra human ring.
Mm-hmm.
My dad has a Whoop, and these all tell your biological age versus your chronological age.
Mm-hmm.
How is the Fountain using AI and different wearables to actually increase their patient care versus be frustrated that people think that they can get a hold of this information and not need a place like the Fountain?
Yeah, with the wearables, I'm kind of contrarian to, I think, where most of the population is. I've talked to a few other people that have shared this same sentiment, but I used to have a Whoop band and was very concerned with HRV and recovery score. And I noticed I would get in this weird place where I would try to do everything I could to maximize my recovery score and HRV. And sometimes you just still wake up and your recovery score sucks. And I would almost self-sabotage the rest of the day. I'm like, oh man, my day is going to suck now. My recovery is terrible. I'm telling myself that I didn't sleep well. And right, I think anybody that's high functioning and maybe a little self-driven realizes you can kind of dictate the pace of your day by the mindset you're in. And so for me, I realized I was very much at the mercy of my recovery score and my HRV for that day. So I stopped wearing it altogether. What we are trying to accomplish in the Fountain, specifically with QLP, is reduction of anxiety. I am a believer that while the wearables can be useful, they elevate anxiety and they cause people to, I think it's a useful tool, especially in fitness and people that are, again, like maybe that's more of a primary focus, but I think in healthcare in general, it's just causing more anxiety. I think it can be a useful tool, again, for if we're trying to accomplish something specific, we can wear it and measure it. But as a day-to-day, this is something I'm monitoring. For me particularly, it's anxiety inducing. And so I see an opportunity down the line as we start getting into the VO2 max testing to maybe utilize the wearables a little bit more. But for right now, I've kind of intentionally kept that aside, recognizing that the whole thesis of QLP is that we need time to step back and not over optimize, right? We need to observe the body, see how it reacts over a period of time. If we're checking our Whoop band or checking the app for, our Aura ring every 30 minutes, it can feel defeating if we're not getting the progress that we want to see. But a lot of times progress takes time. And so we've kind of gone in the opposite direction. Again, not saying we won't incorporate it in the future. I think we will. but I've got to make sure that we incorporate it in a way that feels responsible for our facility and that is not creating more anxiety for our patients.
So, going back to the clinic and the consultation for a patient, what is the moment that you see it often click for someone? When does it all make sense? Does it really take when it gets like super personal to that person? Or are people resistant to the data that they see? Like when do you see someone take this very seriously?
There's two instances typically where I see people kind of light up, right? Like, especially if they're coming in, they've been down the longevity pathway for a little bit and they're maybe feeling a little bit defeated. Two times during the health clarity session, when we really uncover why they're there, it's not about, I want my numbers to look better on paper. It's, as a dad, I want to be present with my kids and I want to be able to, be healthy enough to run around in the backyard with my kids and their kids one day. When we get to that, you see people light up and get emotionally invested and really excited about the prospect of making changes to their health. The second time is when we uncover something that they maybe suspected, but had never had confirmation of. So, hey, again, my blood work looks great. My primary care physician says everything's fantastic. I don't feel right. I don't feel good. I feel off. Something is not right. And when we're able to confirm that through genetics, through advanced blood work, through maybe something on imaging, they get a sense of relief of knowing like, okay, I'm not crazy, right? I'm not just making this stuff up, or there's a reason why I can, reason why I'm feeling the way I do. Something else that's pretty interesting, and I had this conversation with a gentleman yesterday, is people a lot of times look for confirmation of beliefs they have about themselves, especially in the genetics, right? I went in recognizing this test kind of identifies some markers for a genetic predisposition to ADHD. And I was like, yeah, I'm definitely popping up for that. Like, there's no doubt in my mind, like that's going to show up for me. And then when it didn't, my first thought was like, is this test really accurate? But then I realized like, maybe that's something I've been holding on to. Maybe that's something that I've convinced myself is a weakness, or it's a crutch that I'm allowed to use when I'm not at my best. And since having the confirmation that genetically I'm not disposed to that, it's kind of dissipated, which is really cool. I've gotten like almost the opposite effect of like, hey, that's not really a thing. You're good, dude. Like, go out there and just be free and operate the way you're supposed to. Like, yeah, maybe you're a little bit scatterbrained. Sometimes you're easily distracted in today's society. That's pretty easy. But I wasn't getting the result that I hoped for, but the outcome was even better had I gotten the result I was hoping for. We have a guy. So the guy yesterday, is worried about genetic predisposition for just naturally maintaining extra body fat percentage. And I told him, I was like, hey, I'm like, just so you know, when this test comes back, it may not say that you're genetically predisposed, but I don't want you to look at that as like, hey, I don't understand what's going on. I want you to release that belief from your mind that you cannot overcome this, because you can, because you have family members, right? At one point in your life, you were thin, right? We weren't born overweight. Like, so it was really cool to kind of talk. That was the first time I've talked somebody through that conversation. And you could see again, him kind of light up in the sense of like, okay, like this is cool. Like I have opportunity here.
Most wellness clinics and med spas, what are they actually offering versus what the fountain is offering?
Again, like traditional healthcare, I think most wellness clinics are not bad players, right? They're not intentionally out trying to do anybody a disservice or hurt anybody, but I think they're still taking a reactive approach to preventive medicine, right? If we're looking at most clinics in the country only using blood work as a diagnostic tool, again, blood work's great, and maybe we're doing blood work 10 to 15 years earlier than our parents' generation would have done blood work and started looking at these things. So maybe it's an earlier approach, but we're still reacting to pre-existing conditions, right? Specifically in the HRT space, somebody's testosterone's low, their IGF's low, woman's, progesterone's low or estrogen's high. Like, this already exists. This is not preventive at this point. Maybe it's preventive of things coming down the road, but it's still a reactive approach. Adding in the additional diagnostics allows us to actually take a decades ahead approach to managing longevity. So age-related disease risk, things of that nature, we're now actually have a good indication of what you as an individual are at risk for, and we're able to take action decades in advance instead of waiting until symptoms pop up and start then managing at that point. Because at that point, a lot of the damage is done, right? Like if we're intervening with somebody at 40 instead of, or at 60, excuse me, if we're intervening with somebody at 60 instead of 40, it's 20 years we could have done something about it, and at least again worked to mitigate that risk and done everything we could in that time. But most clinics are still relying on kind of the traditional method, the reactive method in longevity. And take it a step further, it's still fragmented. It's still a longevity clinic. It's not primary care. It's not cardiology. It's not a neurologist. It is looking at one very specific segment of the human health domain. And that's great. That's fantastic. We want to take care of all of them, but it still falls into that fragmented, segmented approach to healthcare of like, hey, here we're going to take care of all of this, but you still got to go to your concierge doctor for this, cardiologist for this, endocrinologist for this. And we don't treat all of those domains in our facility, but through the QLP program, it's able to make recommendations that take the whole system into account and say, hey, Jackson is presenting for this. Here's why. Here's the markers that we're seeing across all the diagnostics. And he should go see a cardiologist for that. Here's the improvement we're looking for. Here's the information he needs to communicate to his cardiologist when he goes, which is pretty cool.
So the phrase diagnostic first, what does it actually look like for a client and how you structure from day one?
It means we're not guessing. It means that we are taking actual diagnostic data across multiple diagnostic domains, synthesizing that data and making decisions based on real information, not just, again, this person feels this way. It's an important component, but there needs to be as much information on that front end as possible to make an educated decision as to how to treat the individual.
So once the data comes in, you have all the information. What does a personalized treatment path actually look like? Can you walk me through what that might be for someone?
Yeah, and this is the critical part, right? There's so much do-it-yourself diagnostics available out there. I'm going to use Function Health. No intention to throw them under the table. It's a great option for people to have to get blood work. But once you have that information, what do you, right? And that's really the critical component and the issue that most people are starting to face, and eventually leads them down the road to the problem that we're solving. So once we get all this diagnostic data back, you're meeting with individual providers and physicians, but also if you're enrolled in the QLP program, we're synthesizing all of that together. Again, identifying what is signal versus what is noise, prioritizing and sequencing intervention with health risk mitigation being first. So you have a tumor pop up on your MRI. Obviously, we need to address that before we focus on, making you live for 80 years. So focusing on health risk mitigation first. From there, longevity second, or health span second, and then optimization third. Now, during the intake process, if somebody's enrolled in QLP, again, we're assessing lifestyle and their appetite for addressing their longevity issues. If there's a major health risk, like, I'm sorry, client XYZ, like, we're not pacing intervention there. Like, this is important and critical, and we're going to argue with you on why something needs to be done immediately. But in terms of longevity and optimization, we're identifying the individual's appetite for how aggressively do they want to pursue these things. From there, on the back end, the system creates a game plan in terms of follow-up diagnostics, interventions, which would be therapies that we provide, right? Supplements, dietary and lifestyle recommendations. Also is going to classify who's responsible for each step. So whether there's additional diagnostics that need to happen, if the patient needs to go see, again, a different specialist for something that's popping up. So it's creating a step-by-step game plan broken down into 4-week segments over the next year of here's how we're going to approach your health. And we're talking about longevity and optimization, right? Trying to start everything at once, you're likely to fail. Like, that's just what we've seen. And I think it's human nature. You try to start 5 new habits at once, 4 or 5 out of the 5 are going to fail. Let's start with one thing, make that change, allow it to shift. Then once we have that as a good habit and a good part of our routine, we go on to the next thing. So instead of maybe starting everything at once, 12 to 18 months later, we now have everything onboarded, but we've done it in a way that's sustainable long-term to where this person, okay, again, Now, instead of trying everything at once, we failed after a month, and now 5 years down the road, we're doing nothing. It took us 18 months to get there, but we're in a place where we have a sustainable long-term game plan, and that's how the system works. So again, at a lot of other facilities, when you come back from diagnostic, let's say it's just blood work, they kind of give you a menu of what you're able to do from there. What we're doing is not a menu, it's an action plan. It is, hey, based on all these advanced diagnostics, here's what as an individual you need to, again, mitigate health risk, optimize health span, and then optimize your performance in the current time frame.
Is the fountain for someone that's already sick, or is this more for a person who feels fine, but they know they could be a lot better?
I think both, right? Again, I think it's about meeting patients where they're at. Obviously, the person that feels okay but knows they can do better, or maybe starting to have early symptoms of slowing down as a result of aging, we're a great fit for. And again, we can meet them where they're at, start simple, and as their needs grow, we can grow with them. For the sick individual, right? Of course, there's certain things we're not all encompassing in terms of healthcare. Somebody has a recent cancer diagnosis. We are not the facility for, we're not going to treat that. But if somebody has kind of complex medical history, right? Nothing urgent and pressing, but maybe some lingering chronic stuff they can't really get to the bottom of, the advanced diagnostics and the synthesization of the reports with QLP will help them get answers.
For someone who's listening that's a medical professional, what would you want them to take away from the work that you're doing?
So what we're running into a lot when out in the field, and this is not every physician and concierge doctor that we run into, but there are some that take the approach of they almost don't want to stir up the hornet's nest by doing advanced diagnostics. And the concern, which is valid, is that sometimes it can create anxiety in the wrong patients, which of course we don't want to, but also that it's going to create a ton of extra work for them. And a lot of times the findings are incidental, which of course is great, but I would argue that the benefits of potentially finding something life-saving or trajectory changing for your patient is worth that added effort. However, the things that we're doing at the fountain are intended to enhance the level of care that physicians are giving to their patients. And we also recognize and are sensitive to not creating more work for physicians. And so we're synthesizing, again, the information, giving it to them in as digestible of a report structure as possible. And ultimately, the goal is to have QLP be a licensable product that physicians can use inside of their practice to, again, synthesize this data, right? Even as we're using QLP now, it's still overseen by Dr. Van Mol. So we have, physician oversight and review, but it allows physicians to differentiate themselves by having a more holistic viewpoint or view of the patient, and ultimately serve them better by, again, having that better view.
So if someone was listening to this and they recognize themselves, the fatigue, the feeling of tiredness, or that something's off, and they sense that their checkups aren't really telling them the whole story, what's one thing you'd want them to do this week?
Call us. Be a good start. That'd be a good starting point. No, but I think look at alternative options, right? If they're not here locally, we'd obviously love to help them, but if they're try something different, put some money towards your health, go somewhere that it seems to be doing things differently than what you've experienced. It's the definition of insanity. Keep doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. A lot of people on their health journey are doing that. They go around and around in circles in the traditional system and ultimately end up back at the same place, only to go around the loop. Our logo for QLP is a Q, but the Q is a circle with a little line exiting, and there's a little star in there that's symbolic of the patient, and the patient going around the loop, but the little tail at the end of the Q is the opportunity for the loop. And that's what we're hoping to provide.
Last question.
Sure.
What's the thing about longevity and anti-aging that most people have completely backwards?
I believe that most people think you have to throw 1,000 things to optimize your lunch. However, it's usually a lot simpler.